Prettiest way back home. The pigs are the snootiest, the owls are the hootiest, the plants the fruitiest, stars the shootiest, the grin's the funniest, the smile's the sunniest way back home. Don't know why I left the homestead, I really must confess.
From Studio 401, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on The Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt, and here's our headlines. Scientists print magnetic liquid droplets. New laws of attraction. Inventors of centuries past and scientists of today have found ingenious ways to make our lives better with magnets. From magnetic needle on a compass to magnetic data storage devices and even MRI body scan machines. But now using a modified 3D printer, a team of scientists at the Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory have done just that. Their findings, to be published July 19th in the Journal of Science, could lead to revolutionary class of printable liquid devices for a variety of applications. From artificial cells that deliver targeted cancer therapies to flexible liquid robots that can change their shape to adapt to their surroundings. We've made a new material that is both liquid and magnetic. No one has ever observed this before, said Tom Russell, a visiting faculty scientist at Berkeley Lab and professor of polymer science and engineering at the University of Massachusetts, who led the study. This opens the door to a new area of science in magnetic soft matter. Source: the Berkeley Lab. And unseen forces send objects flying off a shelf in an English tavern. Footage has emerged of an alleged poltergeist in a historic pub in England. The video, which was filmed at Ye Old Shambles Tavern in York, shows supervisor Luke Smithson working at the bar when a stack of boxes and other items suddenly came flying off a nearby shelf. The incident happened at 7:20 a.m. back on Monday, July 1st. I was about to do my second line clean, said Smithson. I walked around the bar and suddenly everything just flew off the shelves. All the boxes flew all over the bar. A couple of glasses came off as well. There was a proper force behind it. Even the speaker on the top shelf was knocked down. The building itself is no stranger to paranormal occurrences, with staff members previously reporting the sound of mysterious disembodied footsteps echoing in rooms after closing time. Whether something is otherworldly accounts for this particular occurrence, however, remains unclear. You can see the video at bendedreality.com. And with a number of UFO enthusiasts volunteering to raid Area 51 is growing uncontrollably amid an avalanche of memes on Twitter, the Pentagon seems to be worried that some might actually show up and try to break them aliens free. However, the U.S. Air Force apparently took the potential threat to the Nevada base seriously, with spokeswoman Laura McAndrews saying that she would like to discourage anyone from trying to come into the area where we train American armed forces. The U.S. Air Force always stands ready to protect America and its assets. This too is reported at bendedreality.com. And now time for a very appropriate fun fact. There is an insurance policy issued against alien abductions. Around 50,000 policies have been sold, mainly to residents of the United States and England. Thanks for listening to the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Fire, all fires are qualified. Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS Tidris.
Okay, nice to be in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the same mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. It is a beautiful night, though, here. This is Lighting the Void, and we are live on the Fringe FM. I am your host, Joe Root. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is July the 24th on into the 25th, and I am excited to have Jim Elvidge as my guest tonight on the program. TheUniverseSolved.com. Oh, look, are we living in a digital reality? The last person that I talked to about this was, I believe, Thomas Campbell. Are we living in a simulation? Is this just a big computer that we're in? Is that even possible? Well, science is looking at this more seriously each year that goes by. It becomes more and more of an actual reality that could be possible. And I say this because I don't want to burst bubbles for those that believe in metaphysics and things, but what if it explained all these? What if it explained the metaphysical principles of all of the stuff, all of the mysteries that we talk about on this show? Even things like the subconscious, symbols, programming, magic. What if there was an explanation for all of this? So we're going to talk about this tonight. Now, I am no expert on it, but tonight we're going to be talking with one, in my opinion. Now, look, if you got to sign up for the webinar because it's coming up, make sure to, I keep forgetting, get the T webinar who sponsors this show. You got 30 minutes before the thing launches, and then it won't let you sign up. So go to gettheT.com, sign up for the webinar at 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll be there Monday night with Ronnie McMullen. And also, this show is brought to you by Ancient Life Oil. I almost said get the tea again. Ancient Life Oil, ancientlifeoil.com, the best CBD on the planet, and preparewiththefringe.com. Thank you all for supporting the show. If you go to the website, you can give us your support there. You can also leave a review or hit that speak pipe button and tell us how you feel about the show, and we'll get you on the air as well. And there's more new features coming to the Lighting the Void website. It's something I've been working on the side. And I used to send all of the guests, like upcoming guests, all that information to the newsletter. But now what I've done, I've put it on the front page. So you can see all the guests coming up to an extent, as well as all the past guests there at lightingthevoid.com. Also, if you've had a UFO sighting and you live out west, give UFO seekers a call at 661-UFO-7889. Check out their YouTube channel, youtube.com/UFO seekers. I want to thank Robert Bruce for coming on the program last night. That was a fantastic show. Got a lot of good feedback about that. Also, tomorrow night on the program, Jürgen, and I don't want to say his name wrong because I think it's German, so Jürgen Zaiva is going to be on the program. We're going to talk about exploring consciousness with him. A very fascinating individual. But tonight, Jim Elvidge is here, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Are we living in a simulated reality? Is this some type of digital universe that we're just unaware of? And Jim received a master's degree in electrical engineering from Cornell University with a specialization in digital signal processing. Now, professionally, his career has been mostly in the high-tech industry, where he has held a variety of engineering and senior management positions. He holds patents in signal processing and was responsible for a number of entrepreneurial ventures, including developing one of the first PC-based music samplers in 1988 and co-founding RadioAMP, which was the Internet's first private label web radio company. He is currently an agile and leadership consultant, helping companies become more lean, innovative, and agile in all aspects of their business. Now, outside of that high-tech arena, however, Jim has had an alternative career focusing on a form of digital philosophy by synthesizing ideas from the varied fields of artificial intelligence, cosmology, nanotech, quantum mechanics, and even the paranormal. Now, this unique blend of knowledge provides the foundation for his first book, The Universe Solved, written from 2006 to 2007 and published in 2008. He frequently appears on many talk radio shows. He's also been on Into the Paranormal with Jeremy Scott, which is a friend of ours, and most of these shows that he's been on focuses on these things, like this one. Now, the nature of the book, The Universe Solved, is to provide categories of evidence that support the idea that our reality is both digital and under a form of programmatic control, which Elvidge calls programmed reality. And he has contributed a special focus on demonstrating that many and various anomalies of quantum mechanics, including entanglement, the observer effect, non-reality, non-locality, and the apparent retrocausality of the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, all have simple, cohesive explanations in the programmed reality model. In fact, he also points out that these anomalies are actual requirements of an efficient digital reality model. He maintains a collection of categories of supporting evidence for this digital philosophy. And we're going to go into that even more. You can check out the website at theuniversesolved.com. And like I said, thank you for coming on the program, but I love talking about the subject. It is like the most mind-stimulating subject, Jim, in the world for me. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I'm really happy to be on the show. You've had some great guests on the show, and I'm really honored to be one of them. So, thanks for inviting me on. And you're right, there you can go in so many different directions with this topic. You can go into, the paranormal, and into quantum physics, and into consciousness, and into weird anomalies that happen. And it can be a fun ride for sure.
I think what gets people kind of off on this subject, and I think what people keeps them, like the barrier that keeps them from looking at this is, people don't like the fact that could be a possibility. Like, you're just saying that I'm inside a computer. What about love? What about my children? What about these types of things? Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, I do get that a lot. And it's, I totally understand that perspective. In fact, when I first started doing this, I started getting some hate mail about things like that. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, when you watch a movie these days, if you're moved by that movie, you're still watching information. You're watching, digital information in that movie. When you read something on your Kindle, you can get really involved in a book that, moves you emotionally. So, the very nature of reality, whether deep down it's digital or continuous, has nothing to do with, love or emotions or anything like that. It's just that we think of words like simulation as something that happens on a computer, and our computers are cold and calculating, and so we have that association. I don't even like the word simulation. I think it's overused, and it kind of implies that there's specifically a designer, or that it's simulating something else. And it's not necessarily the case. It could be, but it is not necessarily the case. So, yeah, we'll probably be talking a lot about this tonight. A lot of the words that we use, they're just heavily weighted with history and associations with other things. And I want to try to detach from that a little bit. The challenge with this area is that there's no new vocabulary for it. So we're kind of stuck using words that fit as best as they can, but they're, also words that conjure up other kind of imagery, like, God or simulation or digital, words like that. And when I say those words, you will get certain associations with those things, but, it doesn't have to be that way.
Sure. And so are you saying that you don't try to attempt to explain those things at all? You maybe it's just the fact that everything else could be explainable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's more that I'm just saying, be comfortable with some uncertainty in the words that we use. When somebody says something's digital, don't think that means it's inside of a computer or that it's, ones and zeros
Gotcha.
at a very coarse level that, makes us robotic in some way. That's not necessarily the case.
However, but they did find, and when I say they, I just don't know the name of the scientist, but maybe you do, but they did find error correcting codes in the nature of reality, right? Didn't they find that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was James Gates. And, that one, that's an interesting one. The error correcting codes that he found were in string theory equations, which are created by people. So it's not like, a unique signature in nature. It's more a unique signature in some equations that scientists came up to try to explain reality. So to me, that one isn't quite as as much of a smoking gun of the digital nature of reality as some of the other things that I talk about in the book. But it is an interesting observation for sure.
What do you think is the biggest smoking gun? Like if you only had one you could pick from, and we'll talk about all the others, but if there was one that you think would get most people's attention, which one would that be?
Well, let me just say we're talking about two different things here. One is the digital or information-based nature of reality. The smoking gun for that might be the nature of matter itself, probably getting down to, how we describe subatomic particles and things like that. But then the other thing we're talking about is the nature of consciousness. And, does it emanate from the brain, the idea of idealism versus materialism and things like that? The smoking gun for that is actually, I think, quantum physics, the experiments that are happening in quantum mechanics these days that show that you have a different reality than I have, or that, your mere act of observing something changes it, and so therefore your consciousness is inextricably tied into reality. That's a really interesting smoking gun there. And I like those as smoking guns because they come from the fields of science. There are other things that feel like smoking guns to me, like near-death experiences that aren't studied so much, and they're kind of shunned in a lot of areas of science. But the amount of data that comes from that, whether it's anecdotal or not, the amount of data that comes out of that area is pretty significant. And that also tells you that there's something outside of, consciousness emanating from the brain.
I was thinking about when I was looking at your background about signal processing and data transformation, or data, I guess, transportation, actually, like how we exchange data. And we've figured out that we can send it through light, right? So we figured that out I guess I would say on a microcosmic level through things like fiber optics and stuff. And I wonder if you've looked at that, like, is that something that resembles what you're talking about? Because on a big level, maybe that's what's happening, through the stars, because in metaphorical books, they all say, everyone's a star. There's so much, all these cosmic rays, and this is like the spiritual books that talk about this. But if you look at the formation of solar systems and this planet and how perfect it is, mathematically, in a lot of ways, it does seem like, there's some type of data coming through. Is it coming through light?
Yeah, interesting. I haven't thought about it so much associated with light the way you describe it, but I do feel like there are different levels of reality that you can look at. And one of the models or examples that I use is a pond. And if you drop a rock in a pond, you can see ripples of water, which are waves, and they look very continuous. But then if you count the number of waves, that's a discrete thing, the number of waves that there are. But then, in each wave, there's water, which looks like a very continuous thing. But then the water is created by a fixed number of atoms in a given space, and therefore that's a discrete thing. But those atoms are supposedly continuous fields. You see, like each level deeper you go, you start questioning, well, it looks digital at this level, it looks continuous at this level, then digital again, then continuous. And what I'm saying is ultimately you get down to some point where it's either digital or it's continuous, or analog or continuous, however you want to use those terms. And I think the evidence shows that it's most likely digital at the deepest level, but it could be way below the level of the structure of a photon, for example.
What is below the structure of a photon? I don't know. Like, I'm not familiar with it. Is it quarks, or is that something bigger?
Yeah, a photon is just a particle that carries the electromagnetic force. And in physics, they've associated particles with every force that they know of. Remembering, of course, that physics, the equations in physics, come from modeling things. It comes from people doing experiments and saying, oh, well, this seems to change according to the square of this field or the square of the distance from something. And so they create equations based on that. But that's all it is a model of, the best information that we can get that describes our reality. As we develop our technology, we can look further out into space, we can look deeper into atoms, we can do experiments that are like, experiments we couldn't do 50 years ago, where we're like teasing very, very tiny time frames and very, very tiny energy levels and things like that. Now we start to see different things that aren't explained by those coarse equations that we had originally. That's kind of what quantum mechanics was all about. And so, what does a photon consist of? In my mind, it's information. It's information passing. So. Or take another particle like an electron. Nobody's ever seen an electron. We used to think of an electron as a little billiard ball type of thing that's spinning around the nucleus of an atom, but nobody's ever stopped one or seen one or anything like that. In fact, all of the efforts to analyze or investigate an electron come to the final conclusion that an electron is just probability space. It's basically, it has some properties, and those properties could be here or it could be there according to a mathematical equation of probability. So it's, when you get right down to it, everything looks like information. And as weird as that sounds, it explains everything too. And if you think about it, if it wasn't information, if things weren't digital deep down, everything would be infinite. So, for example, think about the space between any 2 points. You can always think of more space in between those 2 points, and that's the continuous idea.
Right.
But in quantum mechanics, the idea is that when you get down to something like 10 to the minus 35th meters, space is really quantized even. So there isn't anything continuous there. If there were, then having to define where something is would take an infinite amount of resolution, infinite number of digits to define that. And infinities, to me, that's one of the things that makes no sense. I don't understand the idea of infinities at all. And I don't think anybody can comprehend that. Why would we have a world that is based on infinities rather than a world that is not based on infinities? A continuous world is based on infinities. A digital world is not. And it's so much simpler, takes less energy. Regardless of whether it was created by somebody or something, it still intuitively makes a lot more sense.
Now, I want to be clear too on the digital philosophy that you're talking about, because, and keep in mind, I've got a dropped out college education. Okay, so I understand that an analog wave is it's a little bit more, I guess, not so linear, right? It's a wave, and then if you look at a digital signal, it cuts off like 1-0 on off, but it's more precise and more linear, right? So are you talking about, am I right about that? And are you talking about digital universe literally like that?
Yeah, I am talking about that. So, the wave that you're thinking about, if you were to draw one or look at one on an oscilloscope, or any way that a wave is portrayed, it looks continuous. It looks nice and smooth. But if you go deeper and deeper, let's say you're looking at a wave on a computer screen. Well, when you get down to the level of the pixels on that screen, you're going to see the digital nature of how that wave is created, right? So when we look at things in our macroscopic view with the resolution of our eyeballs, we don't see that fine-grained nature of things. Even when we look at movies, when we look at TVs, when we look at laptop screens, they're all digital. We don't see that. We don't have the ability to get down to that level. We used to when we played games like Space Invaders and things like that. It was very pixelated. But now now unless somebody intentionally creates games like that, we have the technology to create games that look pretty much indistinguishable from from reality. So, my point is just that at some point deep down, things are pixelated, essentially, both in terms of time and in terms of space.
Okay, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense too with the people that talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with the people that talk about DMT experiences, and the psychedelic experience. And I don't advocate for it. I don't advocate against it. It's just, it's weird to me that when they talk about this breakthrough, quote, breakthrough experience that they have when they let go, that they can't really explain what they see, but it's kind of like what you're saying. They say they see the construct or the nature of reality. They talk about it as if it is fractal and geometrical, digital, but also like water, like what you're saying too. They can't explain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I do know what you mean. I've had one such experience, and I'm going to just take an opportunity here to plug, Andrew Gallimore's book. He has a new book called something about alien intelligence, and by alien, he's not talking about the big-eyed grays. He's talking about what you experience, with a sufficient dosage of DMT. And his model is very similar to mine. He's basically saying that deep down, everything's information, that the way particles work at the most fundamental level of reality, they work based on some rules about their neighbors. You've probably seen the game of life that's played on like a grid, and it has these little objects that seem to propagate and move, and some of them they oscillate, and some of them blow up, and they're just they're just models essentially of objects. But his view is that in a three-dimensional world, deep down, everything is just information. Your body, your brain, as we move through the world, it's following a bunch of rules at that level. I call that, in my books, I have a book that came out a year ago, Digital Consciousness Theory. I call it a finite state machine. That was a concept in computer science, but it's the best way to kind of describe what seems to be going on at that level. Well, what Gallimore says is that, we're living in a 3D slice of hyperspace, and we can access that hyperspace when DMT kind of essentially tunes our brain to access it, which is why, in his mind, people kind of flip a reality from what they're perceiving currently to the other space that they go into, on a DMT experience. There's really a lot of interesting stuff in that field of research, how hallucinogens, impact your reality, the history of the use of hallucinogenic, drugs and plants with shamanism and how that relates to spiritualism and those kinds of things. It's all, really, really very fascinating, and it all finds a very nice place to fit into the model that I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're here with Jim Elvidge tonight. Look, if you want to call in, you can. It's 1-800-588-0335. The direct line is 501-424-5130. You can also join the chat at thefringe.fm. Just click on where it says chat. We'll be right back with Jim Elvidge.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Root, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheT.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheT.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheT.com.
Hi, this is Kronox from Belgium, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, The Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm. Call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old China plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Lighting the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you beat a Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website, thefringe.fm, to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
To call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada.
All right, tonight we're here with Jim Elvidge. The website is The Universe Solved, also the name of his book. And if I understand correctly, you're working on a new book as well that further explains this. So what's the title of that book, and when is it going to come out for all of us that are interested?
Yeah, the new book is called Digital Consciousness, and it's already out. It came out in December, and I would actually recommend, if people are going to pick one book, that would be the one to pick, because it's got 10 more years of research into the latest experiments that have been done, and more data, more categories of evidence, and it's much more framed in a scientific standpoint, for people who like that kind of thing.
I want to talk a little bit about paranormal activity that happens, poltergeist activity, things like that I feel. I don't know as far as, we could get into a whole nother discussion about who's telling the truth, what's real, what's not. But the fact is if you look at all of it, this stuff exists. Okay. Like paranormal activity, certain types of poltergeist activity, weird, what I would call glitches in the matrix. And the reason why, and I explained this last night, that I don't stay with a certain belief system all the time is because of work like that you do and others do, like Thomas Campbell, that I feel like we're just trying to explain things that we don't understand, and we call it magic or paranormal. But maybe there's programs that are interfacing, or they get messed up just like a glitch on a computer, you know.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that tonight after I grabbed my coffee, just the nature of how we make sense out of things. You know, we observe stuff, and then we try to develop a theory that explains what we observe. And if you were to observe something, you know, that's very, very simple, like how does the world look when we walk around, especially if we live in an area where there aren't mountains, you know, we come to the conclusion that we live on a flat planet, right? But it's not until you get elevated above the surface of the planet that you start to see the curvature of the planet, and then you realize, oh, okay, it's round, it's spherical. So then you need a new model, you need a new theory that's going to explain that. And then you look at these stars that are up there, and you know, what are those? It look like they're in a dome, and the dome seems to be rotating around the Earth. And that, okay, so let's have that geocentrism type theory. But then you realize that there are planets, and there's, you know, retrograde motion that isn't explained by this, and all these kinds of things. And now you have to modify your theory. And my point is that, and you know, then, you know, we still think that everything is, you know, up until the 1900s, we still thought that everything was hard and materialistic until quantum mechanics came along and just blew that away, and we had to modify the theory again. My point is that you should never think that a theory is the be-all and end-all. That's why people don't use the word fact in science. There are no facts. There are just theories, and some theories are accepted generally, and then others are more in the realm of a hypothesis that needs more support to be considered a valid theory. That's the same thing now. You know, the theory that I put forth and Tom Campbell puts forth explains more than anything else in terms of a theory of everything. Like, you know, we can really explain all of this stuff, including the paranormal that you ask about. So to me, it's a theory that ought to be taken really seriously, because you know, the other way that scientists tend to view this is anything that doesn't fit in their, you know, their accepted set of theories, they'll, you know, address in one of two ways. They'll either say, okay, outside of my area of expertise, don't know much about it, doesn't fit, you know, and they'll kind of just look the other way. Or they'll say, it's BS, it's pseudoscience, it's wrong. And, you know, that still makes them feel good. But the right way to do it is to say that stuff exists. People are experiencing these things. Therefore, we have to modify our theory of everything to encompass that and to include that. And that's really what I've done here. I've just tried to take all of the experiences that people have, including the ones that don't fit a normal, you know, what we might call a normal scientific model, and make a model that does fit all of that stuff. So, you know, paranormal, ghost sightings, poltergeists, or whatever. If you think about those, what are they really? You know, they're subjective experiences that we have. You know, when you and I walk around the road and we see a car go by and we describe it the same way, there's a blue Toyota, and I say, oh yeah, it's a blue Toyota. We feel like that's a really solid thing. You know, because you and I have a consensus of our experience, and all of our friends do, and pretty much everybody sees the same thing the same way. But then there are people like schizophrenics, or people who are on DMT, or, you know, something else. They're seeing something a different way, you know, and we tend to say, oh, that's because they're not right in the head at the moment. But if you get right down to it, what's really happening is our reality is not fixed and objective. The scientists who have done the best research in this area have come to that conclusion. And I don't want to say the word fact, but 80 orders of magnitude of certainty from some of the best names in physics, you know, that an objective reality doesn't exist, meaning it's soft, it's flexible. It's flexible based on our consciousness. Oh, well, so what does that tell you about now when you start thinking about ghost sightings or UFO sightings? Yeah, that makes it completely different now, because all those things are subjective experiences. And if a bunch of people have them, then there's something there. It's just not something that fits into an explanation that we have in science. Therefore, we call it paranormal. Back in the 1800s, they called rocks falling from the sky paranormal. And they called people crackpots who reported that until somebody came up with an idea that these were meteors from outer space, and it was a bona fide occurrence. And now all of a sudden it was science. And the same thing's happening now. We have these weird things like Mandela effect or ghost sightings or UFO sightings or telepathy that don't fit a standard model of science, but they do, they do fit a general experiential domain that enough people are having them. They're not just one-offs, that you have to take them seriously. And so a subjective experience, if I think about this like if I were playing a video game, and I like to use this analogy because even though it sounds almost too convenient, you can explain this because we can understand what goes on in a video game. You can understand real well. And then it makes sense that this could be happening in our reality. So, for example, I'm in a video game. Let's call this I'm goggled in, a virtual reality type thing, and I see what my colleagues in the game or my friends in the game, the other players are seeing. We're killing monsters. We're doing whatever we want to do. But all of a sudden, I see some weird thing on the screen just zip across the screen, and nobody else sees it.
Right.
Well, does that mean that it wasn't there? No, it was there. It was programmed in.
It means you're schizophrenic. That's what it means.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But I saw it because my spiritual level was above 50. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Maybe that was the rule that allowed me to see that thing that other people didn't see. So there's an explanation for that right there in a video game. Our reality, being soft, being digital, can follow the same kinds of rules. So these subjective experiences that we have are nothing mysterious, really. They're just not generally accepted.
And so, again, when it comes to creation, though, do you look at that factor at all? What I mean by that is the universe seems like it's creating, at least in our section of the universe, wherever it relates to, it seems like it's trying to create life. That's just my theory. Like it's doing what it can to create places for consciousness to experience things, kind of like me tapping into an online gaming universe and going to a server where I can experience this game or that game. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, it looks like that to me too. And even the fine-tuned nature of the universe, all of these constants that are perfectly tuned for life, not just life, but perfectly tuned for matter to exist, for our physics to make sense. What are the odds that those numbers would just be the way they are? There's only one theory in science that explains that. It's called the Anthropic Principle and the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics. And honestly, it's outlandish. It's, if you're familiar with this concept of Occam's razor, guy from Holland back in the 1100s or something like that, William of Occam, he said that the most simple explanation is probably the correct one. I mean, it's a good principle. It's not always right, but it's a good principle. Well, the many worlds theory and the Anthropic Principle is not a simple explanation. It's an outlandishly complex explanation. A much simpler explanation is that our universe is designed in some way. And by designed, I don't mean that there's a white bearded God up there creating it, or even that it was created by an alien or by us in the future creating an AI that we're playing in. Those could be possibilities, but it could also be the possibility that the universe created itself, and that through various feedback mechanisms, it's optimized itself for consciousness, for consciousness to experience things, right, for consciousness to evolve, and that's also Tom Campbell's theory.
Yeah, and I think what I think happens, and a lot of times too, is I've seen this in the spiritual community where, and it's not a bad thing. Right? I mean, everybody wants to experience things their own way. That's what I've noticed. But they kind of give up. Like they'll start to go down this road, and then it's like, okay, this is getting kind of this is getting kind of complex. It's almost ironic that it's woo-woo for a spiritual person, but it gets so complex that they just give up and go, you know what? I like the idea of God, angels, demons, and all this other stuff. So it's easier for me. And look, I get that.
It's easier. Yep.
But I want to know so bad. And that's what I admire about scientists, that they want to know so bad that they will continue to dig no matter how complex things get. But what I will say, and I brought this up on the show before, is what I do worry about is, and I just want your opinions on this. Do you ever worry about that we might be messing with something that we shouldn't be? For instance, like the colliders and things like that, where we think we really understand the construct and then we cause some type of effect that we never saw coming. And one of the main reasons why that I talk about that is because who is overseeing this stuff? As far as governments and the military, these guys aren't smarter than you guys. So, I mean, you guys could just go up to them and say, well, we're making progress. And they'll say, okay, you know what I mean? So, especially when it comes to weaponry and things like that, science seems to be scary for some folks, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, two thoughts there. One is kind of the nature of what we investigate and how dangerous some of those things can be. Like, for example, I don't know, nuclear energy or nanotechnology or cloning or
Neuralink.
Any of those things. I mean, honestly, the first person that tries to upload their consciousness ends up dying. Nobody's ever going to know the difference, but I think they're going to end up dying when they do that. My point here is that there's a downside to a lot of technology. There's a potential danger to a lot of technology. AI is a classic example, and there's a very positive side. And we're never going to not pursue it because of the downside. We never have. But the interesting thing is that we never seem to get too close to that apocalyptic, scenario. For example, in the Industrial Revolution, people thought that we were, destroying the Earth within 10 years or something like that, and it didn't happen. With nuclear energy, the doomsday clock was 2 minutes to midnight back in 1962, but it didn't happen. We didn't have nuclear annihilation. The population explosion was projected in the 70s to basically destroy the planet within 20 years. We're going to run out of oil within 30 years. Mm-hmm. Now it's global warming. And
more specifically, what I'm talking about is now we're trying to push particles past the speed of light and smashing them together, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I mean, if you could figure out cold fusion, that would be great, right? But I just wonder sometimes, is it dangerous to keep pressing the button on what's behind the simulation, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think so. This is just my point of view, partially based on the argument that I was making, that it seems like we even things out and that we don't really what Michio Kaku call it tickling the tail of the tiger. We don't get that close to things. But if our universe is as complex as I think it is, and when I say universe, I don't mean what we look out and see. I mean everything. I call it all that there is. ATTI. If it's as complex as I believe it probably is, we're so far removed from hacking it that there's just an illusion that we think we can hack it. You know what I mean? I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where we can mess it up or wake up from it or something like that, because then it's kind of game over, and why do I think there's a purpose here? That comes from a lot of, kind of shamanic beliefs, spiritual beliefs, experiences that people have had when they've tapped into the other side is very consistent. The ancient mystics all had a very consistent message that we're all connected, that our lives have purpose, that we reincarnate. All these kinds of things are really, really similar. And I don't think they can be explained by like one culture coming up with it and, that spreading around the globe. It seems to come from different experiences in different places and different time zones in different ways, but it all points to the same thing. To me, that's actually evidence that there is a purpose behind all of this. And, the purpose is to evolve, to, purify consciousness, to evolve the consciousness. And if that were the case, then, hacking the universe would completely destroy that. So I can't imagine that the system would ever let that happen.
Yeah, it might just shake off the fleas, once it gets once it gets too bad. That's all I'm saying, right?
Yeah, so I don't worry about it. In fact, I think that's what's opening people's eyes. When we do these crazy quantum experiments and find out that there's one called Wigner's friend, where they determine that there's two different realities going on at the same time, depending on the observer. When we start doing that kind of thing, we're getting hints about a deeper reality, which is great. It's wonderful. It opens up our minds. It makes us think differently. It makes us appreciate each other, perhaps. It makes us maybe realize that we're all connected. We don't have to compete with each other all our lives and things like that. So, I tend to have a more positive view of, the probing the limits of science than some people might.
Fair enough. I was just representing a question that comes up in the culture of conspiracy.
Sure.
Right. So
yeah, absolutely. And I get it. And I understand it. I think I'm not saying I'm right for sure. But that's just my point of view on that.
Yeah, you also got to ask yourself, where would we be without science, too? For those that are like anti-science and so afraid of it, where would we be without it? You brought up a good point earlier. If I was to take a cell phone, and you've heard this before, back into the 1800s, they'd shoot me in the street, call me a witch or something, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Things are massively different now, and it seems what I think is cool, even though this does scare some people, and I want your opinions on this too, is the acceleration of technology. Now, it's not like just growing at a constant rate. It seems to be compounding like compound interest as we learn and get faster with things. Is that really happening? Because for me as a consumer, it feels that way.
Yeah, it does. And that's actually a little bit mysterious to me, to be honest. There's this idea, I'm sure you've heard of Moore's Law, which basically was applied to transistor density on chips. So every 18 months, or somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, for the past 40 years, we've been doubling the density of transistors on chips. So that leads to all kinds of things. When you can get more transistors in there, you can do more with it. The clock cycles are faster. The computers go faster. Therefore, if you track the speed of computing, that's also moving kind of like at Moore's Law. However, that does have an ultimate limit. You can only make a transistor out of at least a solid state transistor out of so many atoms. Once you hit one atom in diameter, then you can't do that anymore. So there are some limits to technology in that way, but we tend to find new technologies. I read recently that somebody put like Wikipedia on a genome. So there's a different technology that maybe stores even denser information, and so we'll switch over to that perhaps. But I think the point here is that things do accelerate, but they accelerate with some limits. And one of the, I think, fallacies is that if you project this forward and say, okay, well, we're moving at a certain pace, therefore at some point in time, and the transhumanists tend to pick 2045 as a time frame, we're going to have this technical singularity. Everything goes crazy. We merge with machines. I don't really buy that, because I think there are other forces at work. For example, I work in the software industry, and I know that the complexity of building more and more complex software, like general AI, has other forces that work against Moore's Law. Just plain collaboration, understanding of how brains learn and things like that. We're not advancing as fast as Moore's law in some of those areas. So that's going to keep us from, it might level out at some point, or it might just take a lot longer to kind of hit that singularity. But, I think it's not correct to say that we're just going to keep following Moore's law and then all of a sudden everything is going to go ballistic in another 25 years or so.
Yeah, I think there's some legitimate concern about that. Like Jaron Lennier has been a big advocate for that, to say that, our technology is moving faster than we're ready for. And I know we're kind of getting off of the nature reality and all that stuff, but I do worry about those types of things. Like, do we need, and I think you addressed this in your new book too, Digital Philosophy, like, or what was the name of your new book? Digital Consciousness. I'm sorry. So digital consciousness, right? Science or philosophy, which one comes first? That's a pretty compelling concept. Do we need to be at a certain level in the society before we can start accepting these things? I don't feel like it's smart to hook up people to a neural link right now, because neurology it's great where it's at, but they don't know enough about the brain for me to want to hook up to it. But they're already starting to do this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Like it reminds me of the early X-rays that people had. Oh, we got a technology. Let's burn our hands without knowing, too much about what that technology really means or what it will do to us. We made a lot of mistakes in the atomic era. We made mistakes with, some of the experiments that the CIA did on people, mind control experiments, MK Ultra, things like that. Those were mistakes. Those were things that should not have been done. And we need to kind of heed those warnings. We're going to hurt people when we do some of these things. Now, some people may want to be the guinea pig and don't mind being that just for the, spirit of advancement of science. And that's up to them, but it's certainly not where I would want to be.
Well, I think I've pounded you enough with moral dilemmas, right? So let's, I want to look at, we just got a couple of minutes here. Before the break, when you look at creation, let's say, the growing of a baby and all the steps that it goes through and the geometry that goes behind that, are these some of the things that are like the basis of what you guys are talking about? How it just really looks like there's some type of programming going on.
It does. I mean, if you look at the way genetics work, and I've read a couple books on this, it's really phenomenal. They're like machines. And again, it's machines that follow rules like a finite state machine. They're still at a level that we can see, so it's not the fundamental level of reality, but even at that level, we see, the patterns of information exchanges and, rules and things like that create behavior and so forth. And that's, that's interesting by itself. There is an idea that the patterns you see in nature recreate at different levels. So we see, if we look at the cosmic scale and see these kind of filaments between, clusters of galaxies and things like that, it looks an awful lot like the way a brain looks with the way it's interconnected. Other patterns, circular patterns and things like that also occur at different levels. And that tells you there's some math perhaps behind the way nature works. If there's math behind it, then there's probably programming behind it, or, computation in a way. Again, those are words that conjure up an image, but it's not, the cold image I'm talking about. It's just the way nature works.
I think Laird Scranton, who's also been on the show and will be coming back on the show in the future, would agree with you on that. Even when it comes to the mystery schools and old societies and of indigenous tribes, there seems to be a fundamental protocol behind a lot of these things and symbols and reality. He's got a new book about the scientific meaning of Ganesha, which is, I just got in. I can't wait to read. But I'm looking at your book, Digital Consciousness here, which has got some very compelling chapter titles. I can't wait to dig into that. We've got to take a break here. We're with Jim Elvidge. Look, you can call in 1-800-588-0335. I do see your questions in the chat. I will try to get to them as well as the text messages. We'll be right back.
how we can get the information.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
May the gods look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you?
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing his journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much. What a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal, there's a show called Into the Paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Hear me live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on the Fringe FM.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonderlight Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com. We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling. The ground shook. You could hear rushing water. And then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails. Stores with their shelves stripped bare. ATMs can't operate. Deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts. We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, the Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
And welcome back. You are listening to Lighting the Void with your host, Joseph Roop.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void Radio. Tonight we're here with Jim Elvidge, author of The Universe Solved and also Digital Consciousness. You could get those books too on Amazon, but if you go to the website, I believe, Jim, it's theuniversesolved.com. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
You know what I did when I put up your flyers is I thought it was the Universe Resolved, and I put up a bunch of flyers that said the Universe Resolved, and I had to go fix all those. It's the Universe Solved. But
that's okay. If people just Google my name, all of that stuff will come up. Unfortunately for me, there aren't too many other Jim Elvidges in the world.
Yeah. Thank God for that. Right. So that's the universesolved.com. I think that's a big statement. You do realize that, right? That, I mean, it's the universe solved. Do you really claim to have, let's just get this out of the way for the people in the chat room. Do you really claim to have the universe solved? Creation, all of that, everything.
Of course not. And to be perfectly honest, the Universe Solved is a great title for a book. It's it captures your attention, right? But I will say that as far as theories of everything go, I firmly believe that my theory explains more than any other theory out there. So as far as what solves the universe's dilemmas the most, it's the stuff that's in that book or the stuff that's in the Digital Consciousness book.
That's a big claim. Well, you know what? I wanted to bring up fear real quick. And we were talking about this during the break. Fear is something that I found fascinating because the occult, specifically people that like Crowley and even others that are in the Golden Dawn and all these other big time spiritual advisors talk about how fear is the enemy. And what I noticed, and one of the reasons why I took on this show to try to get science and spirituality and try to figure out what's going on there, is because there are scientists that take that same route, i.e. like Thomas Campbell, like I was telling you about during the break, who even told me on the show that fear, once he realized what his own fears were, preconceived notions, when he had these quote out-of-body experiences, he could go much further, and that we're programmed by our own beliefs and boundaries. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But when I actually went and tried to do the things, I realized just how much of an effect it had on me from being able to do what he was doing. And so I wonder, maybe this whole thing can be demystified if we just can get past those things.
Yeah, I believe in that. And I think fear is one of those things that, in a way, keeps us, I don't want to say the word grounded because that sounds like a good thing, but it keeps us in line in a way. So, for example, if you look back evolutionarily, if we didn't have a healthy fear of the unknown or a fear of change, we might not have passed on our DNA. If we challenged the saber-toothed cat, or we ate the weird red berries, or we took a dive off of a cliff, or, whatever the things were that you're not supposed to do that are outside the bounds of normal human behavior, if we do those, we don't pass on our DNA. So the only people who pass on their DNA are the ones that have a, quote, healthy amount of fear that keeps them grounded. However, in today's world, it's a different world. We're not tribal anymore. We don't have to worry about, not everywhere. I mean, some places we still do, but generally you don't have to worry about who's coming around the next corner. And in business and in, general walks of life, it's better to be innovative and creative and open-minded and try to get rid of those fears. So we've kind of moved into an era where fear holds us back. And I think that it also, it colors our experiences quite a bit. I've had quite a few people who have written to me or, I've experienced over the years who are just like fear-driven. And you can just see that they're in a tiny little domain that's very difficult for them to get out of because of their fears. Once they get out of the fears, get over their fears or push the boundaries, all of a sudden they're so much more satisfied and content with life, and they see so much more meaning in life. So I agree. I think, fear is something to conquer, and it's one of the things that holds us back these days.
Yeah. Have you noticed that I'm focusing way more on the moral dilemmas than I am science? That has to be something inside me, right? So, I'm not going to play around and act like I'm a big scientific guy. I listen to other people that talk too, like Mark Passio, where he says, look, the idea of solipsism, I hope I said that right, or the idea that there really is no truth except the truth that we make or discover, is one of the most dangerous ideas, and that's how we're controlling humanity and all this stuff. I think about these types of things. I really do.
Yeah, sure, and I think that's one of the ideas that shamans have, or people who kind of investigate the idea of mind expansion and so forth. That staying tuned to this reality where we're going through the work, play, entertainment, sleep cycle keeps us focused, for better or for worse, on a ritual. And I think it's probably for worse. I think there's a lot more mind-expanding, rewarding experiences that you can have if you can get out of that ritual. Alan Watt talks about, what would you do if money were no object? People find that if they have the courage to take a chance at doing something that, really tickles them, that really excites them, they end up finding a way to make life work and becoming, much more satisfied with life as a result. So, I think there's a tendency for fear, cultural norms, things like that, possibly the government, possibly your church, to keep you, on the treadmill. And a lot of these ideas that we have that take you off the treadmill are scary to them, because then they can't control you anymore.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. 100%. Okay. I'm going to try to get into the science of this a little bit more. So the big questions, creation, right? Let's start there. What do you have you claimed to solve anything as far as digitally, or with the digital philosophy, about how creation happened?
Yeah. So there's, kind of four ways to think about the origin of all
I say creation. My apologies.
No, it's okay. Same thing. I tend to use that word. It doesn't matter. But, one way is to say that there was some conscious entity that created our reality. The logical candidates are aliens, artificial intelligence, us in the future, or a godlike figure. And that's one possibility. Second possibility is that there was a conscious entity that created a construct and a bunch of rules that allowed the construct to evolve. It's kind of like the, wind up the clock and let it go type of idea. That's another possibility. The third possibility is that all that we see sprang from nothing, and this is the scientific point of view. The fourth possibility is a more, purely evolutionary concept, and this one give credit again to Tom Campbell for. He comes up with an idea where basically from nothing, from a null world, can come with a little bit of a leap of faith, can come a disturbance in the sense of one thing reflecting something else. And when it reflects something else, now you have the concept of space. And then when it reflects something else and flips its domain, now you have the concept of time. And when it splits, it gets more and more complex. And eventually you create this reality construct on which you can and basically the attribute of that construct is consciousness. And then you talk about, well, how does consciousness evolve? What's the fastest way for it to evolve? Well, one of the fastest ways for it to evolve is to split it up into little pieces and have each one of those little pieces go and evolve by interacting with each other.
Right? Something kind of like that.
Yeah, exactly like that. But, just having them split up isn't good enough. They have to have a way to interact. And the way to interact is creating a construct like the architect on the Matrix did, where we learn and we interact and we think things are more solid than they actually are, so we take them seriously. We think we die, so we take certain things seriously. And as a result, we might learn a little better and evolve our consciousness a little better. And that's that theory. That's sort of the evolutionary theory. And it's the one that I tend to subscribe to. The third one there, the one that the universe sprang from nothing, I mean, there's no precedent for it. There's no evidence for it.
And that's the science. Isn't that ironic? That's the scientific theory, right?
Yeah, and that's the scientific theory. And I kind of reject that on the Occam's razor standpoint. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. The only thing that explains the perfect fine-tuned complexity, I mean, when I say perfect, there are things like cosmic constants that have to be within one part in 120 orders of magnitude, like a number of 1 followed by 120 zeros, have to be perfectly tuned for things to work as they do. Otherwise the universe collapses or rips apart instantly. For things like that to happen, there has to be something more than the idea that there's that many different universes that are all destroying themselves out there, and we just happen to be in the one that's so perfectly designed for all these things. So I think there's either an evolutionary process, Tom Campbell calls it the fundamental rule of improvement, or there was a conscious entity that created this thing. Now, I think that the evidence from the mystical experiences that people have had over the year, the roots of our religions actually, kind of indicate more the evolutionary aspect of it, not the the individual aspect. Like there's not a lot of anecdotal evidence that when people have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience that they pop by themselves 30 years in the future when we're playing around the latest mainframe computer and creating a simulation. There's not much evidence for that. There's also not much evidence that people meet an extraterrestrial that tells them, I just created this whole reality for you to be involved in. They do meet extraterrestrials, but they're part of our existing reality. So again, I think the evidence again points to a continuous evolutionary process of our universe.
That's fantastic to me. And I'm obsessed with the polarity idea, the view of polarity. Like I was telling you about left brain, right brain, right brain's the spiritual woo-woo artistic side, left brain's the real logical material side. And I think if you want to control somebody, then you start playing with each one of those sides. But what's really cool and ironic about this whole thing is I can go to somebody who I think is completely woo, right? Let's say a witch or a magician or someone that claims to be a mage, and really sit down with them and talk to them, and they'll start breaking out deep scientific theories of quantum physics and waves and all this stuff, right? I can go to a scientist who on the level seems to talk about those things up front, but as we sit down and speak like I am with you, they start talking about philosophy that kind of, and it's like, how come, if you look in our history, we've been completely divided by these things. In fact, we would kill each other. I look at what happened to Galileo when you started trying to bring these things together. And now I think on a positive note, we should be far happier because we've got both sides starting to meet in the middle now.
Yeah, I agree. And certainly there are still those that, shoot daggers at the other side, but there is an awful lot of people in the middle of that. And in fact, a lot of Nobel laureates that say, some pretty interesting things like, who was it? Werner Heisenberg, The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will make you an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
Right.
Even Einstein said reality is merely an illusion. So many open-minded scientists really do see the philosophical and the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, and to my point, I'll give you an example. Earlier, we were talking about the mystery of creation. You brought up how science spawned from the no thing. It created something, and then that something duplicated itself, then it flipped on its head, then that duplicated, right? So if you look at that, well, that philosophy is buried inside the Western, and I know this is kind of weird, but the Western Kabbalistic system or the mystic Kabbalah, you know, the Ein Sof, how it comes from nothing, then duplicates itself. And then the triangle of Bina, I forget Chokma, they flip and it goes into the abyss and flips again. And then you got that. And that's which one started first, right? And now that I'm looking at your new book, you even have that question, which one's first, science or philosophy? It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, one of the things that I do in this book that I didn't talk much about in the first one is note the similarities between this philosophy, this digital consciousness philosophy, and Eastern philosophy. You know, in the Eastern world, you know, Maya, where did that come from? That was a Sanskrit word that meant illusion. It's a central theme in Hinduism. And according to their ancient texts, that the human experience is just this interplay between our eternal consciousness and this temporary, illusory world. Our eternal consciousness is where we really are. The temporary, illusory world is the, quote, simulation that we're in, that we live in, you know, for 75 years and then, you know, go do another one. So the model fits the way the, you know, Eastern mystics, you know, talked about it. It's perfectly the same. All that there is evolving according to a process of continuous improvement. We just talked about, you know, Tom Campbell's point of view and you know, the description of the evolutionary universe. You know, the same thing. Maya was temporary, you know, in that we can reincarnate many times, but we always go back to this pure consciousness in between lives. And the enlightened man is the one who's awakened. It was a cycle of continuous improvement, just the way the universe is. The nature of consciousness creating reality. You know, Brahman was considered to be the ultimate reality of the universe, and its meaning is described in the sacred text as being consciousness bliss. So it all ties in really well.
Have you ever thought about doing a podcast, man? Have you ever thought about it? Even if it's like 15 minutes at a time, do you do a podcast?
I don't, and I have thought about it, and it's something I would love to do. But, you know, the interesting thing is I've talked to people, and my girlfriend is one of these, you know, that I'm referring to, who say, you know, your ideas, the philosophy you're talking about, that Tom Campbell talks about, other people talk about it, even Elon Musk and others now, it's all new and exciting to the Western world, but to Eastern ears, it's like, yeah, of course. We've always known that, you know, and, you know, that's an interesting revelation for me, who was brought up in a, you know, Western educational institution. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
Fantastic, man. That's great. You brought up reincarnation just a second ago. That's the my biggest mysteries, right? Creation, consciousness, what happens after we die. Those are the big three for me. And then it seems like everything else falls underneath the pyramid for me. And maybe, you know, are we alone in the universe? To me, that's just kind of obvious, but I'll put that up there too. So what do you believe, or what is your theory that happens after death, or do we even die?
I think our consciousness doesn't die, which is why this whole push for immortality, uploading your consciousness into silicon, is the most ridiculous thing in the world to me. I think we're already immortal. It's just our bodies that aren't immortal. And, you know, why do I think that? I actually think that from, you know, having a scientific point of view about this. If you look at some studies on awareness during resuscitations, when people's brain have completely stopped working, you know, they have awareness. There are a lot of cases of people explaining things that could not be explained by a dead brain and a non-beating heart. So there's that. There's cases of children who recall previous incarnations. I'm sure you've heard about the James Lennier case, a classic example. You know, he remembered being a fighter pilot in World War II, remembered it in incredible detail. And, you know, as his parents investigated, they found out that he was telling a story that there was no way he could have known, but it turned out to be true. And, you know, that's just one of many. You know, the near-death experiences where, you know, people are seeing only deceased relatives. Why don't, you know, if it's all in your mind, why aren't you seeing, you know, people that you know? You know, so all these things together, when you start adding it all up, it leads to the conclusion that there is a consciousness that's separate from the body. If there's a consciousness separate from the body, then what we're doing right now has to be temporary, and our consciousness, therefore, is immortal, essentially.
Fair enough. So I agree with that too. But I won't. If I told you that I didn't have doubt about it, I would be lying to you. Even though there's so much of this evidence, I can't explain why that fear and doubt is still there. Maybe it's a personal venture, but when I talk to certain people, they still have that doubt. Well, maybe when I pass away, you know, it turns off, right?
I know. I understand it. It's a really interesting thing. It's human nature, I think, to have that doubt. Anton Zeilinger, who I mentioned before, talks about the, you know, how the experiments that they did in this institute in Austria, these physics experiments, demonstrated for, you know, near certainty that there was no objective reality out there. And that yet when he was asked what he believed, he was kind of like, well, I'm 50-50 on it. You know, so despite the fact that his experiments show that to an amazing order of certainty, there is no objective reality, he just couldn't separate his, you know, 60 years of learning, you know, that's been kind of beaten into his head all that time. We're all the same way. So, yeah.
I don't know how much you've looked into space on this or astronomy, but I'm super fascinated with the night sky, the planets, all of that. And I've got several theories in my head about what these stars are actually doing and why they're here. Have you ever looked into that, thought about that? Do you have any theories behind it? I mean, are these just, I guess, sources of creation that just pop up and destroy, or are they part of the program? Do you think about that at all?
I think they're part of the program, if we want to use that word. Why they're there, you know, is still a little bit TBD, maybe because they make us feel insignificant, and that has some, you know, some value to the purification of our consciousness. I haven't really thought through that too much, but I do think that all that we experience looking out there is part of this quote simulation or program that we call life. You know, what its purpose is, still TBD for me.
Right. And I don't mean just like from a video game level. I mean, these things emit all kinds of stuff that create life, but also can destroy life. Sound, frequency, radiation, you know. And it's funny that back when man started, they used to worship the sun. Some people still do. Like, it is the creator. It's the ultimate symbol of creation and life. And then some people say, oh, well, they're portals. They're gateways to other realms. And I've had other people tell me, well, that's what alchemy is really, is once you transmute your energetic body to a certain level, you merge with consciousness, and now you can actually travel through star systems and stuff. And I nod my head at all that. But again, it's kind of like watching science fiction and thinking, okay, well, how much of this is wishful and how much evidence do you have for this, right?
Yeah. And I think if you think about it, the nature of our heavens creates an interesting experience for us. So, for example, the fact that the sun exists and that our Earth is tilted creates seasons and creates day and night and creates, you know, dream times when we typically sleep and dream and times when we're awake and interact with people. If it weren't that way, if we were, you know, on a artificially warmed planet with no sun, we wouldn't have all of those things. So it's something that adds to, you know, to our experience. Okay, well, let's say there was just and I'm coming up with this on the fly right now. I've never thought about this before, but let's say you just have the sun and one planet. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, if the planet was a little piece that popped off of the sun as the solar system was forming, there should be other pieces out there. Well, lo and behold, there are.
Right.
And so being able to see those and explore those, also adds to our experience. And then, you go beyond the solar system and galaxies and clusters of galaxies, and, it all adds its own way to richen our experience on Earth.
Yeah, I want to dig a little bit deeper into that too. But I can't believe we're halfway through this thing already. These conversations go by so quick. You can call into the show too. It's 1-800-588-0335. The direct number is 501-424-5130. If you've got a question or want to speak with Jim, the lines are open, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
This is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on the Fringe FM.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
From Studio 401, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt, and here's our headlines. Scientists print magnetic liquid droplets. New laws of attraction. Inventors of centuries past and scientists of today have found ingenious ways to make our lives better with magnets. From magnetic needle on a compass to magnetic data storage devices and even MRI body scan machines. But now using a modified 3D printer, a team of scientists at the Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory have done just that. Their findings to be published July 19th in the Journal of Science could lead to revolutionary class of printable liquid devices for a variety of applications. From artificial cells that deliver targeted cancer therapies to flexible liquid robots that can change their shape to adapt to their surroundings. We've made a new material that is both liquid and magnetic. No one has ever observed this before, said Tom Russell, a visiting faculty scientist at Berkeley Lab and professor of polymer science and engineering at the University of Massachusetts, who led the study. This opens the door to a new area of science in magnetic soft matter. Source, the Berkeley Lab. And unseen forces send objects flying off a shelf in an English tavern. Footage has emerged of an alleged poltergeist in a historic pub in England. The video, which was filmed at Ye Old Shambles Tavern in York, shows supervisor Luke Smithson working at the bar when a stack of boxes and other items suddenly came flying off a nearby shelf. The incident happened at 7:20 a.m. back on Monday, July 1st. I was about to do my second line clean, said Smithson. I walked around the bar and suddenly everything just flew off the shelves. All the boxes flew all over the bar. A couple of glasses came off as well. There was a proper force behind it. Even the speaker on the top shelf was knocked down. The building itself is no stranger to paranormal occurrences, with staff members previously reporting the sound of mysterious disembodied footsteps echoing in rooms after closing time. Whether something is otherworldly accounts for this particular occurrence, however, remains unclear. You can see the video at bendedreality.com. And with a number of UFO enthusiasts volunteering to raid Area 51 is growing uncontrollably amid an avalanche of memes on Twitter, the Pentagon seems to be worried that some might actually show up and try to break them aliens free. However, the U.S. Air Force apparently took the potential threat to the Nevada base seriously, with spokeswoman Laura McAndrews saying that she would like to discourage anyone from trying to come into the area where we train American armed forces. The U.S. Air Force always stands ready to protect America and its assets. This too is reported at bendedreality.com. And now time for a very appropriate fun fact. There is an insurance policy issued against alien abductions. Around 50,000 policies have been sold, mainly to residents of the United States and England. Thanks for listening to the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Right, me old Chinas. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me babble. If, like me, you found your way to Light in the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of the fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
That we may be living in a programmed reality. Many of the Earthlings are, of course, programmed by school, religion, and media, or the lack of media. But what we're going to talk about today is another kind of programming.
We humans are unable to experience the true nature of the universe unfiltered. Our senses and brains can only process a fraction of the world. So we have to use concepts and tools to learn about the true nature of reality. Technological progress not only widened our knowledge about the universe, it also made us aware of unsettling possibilities.
Like physics was my main sort of training, and from a physics standpoint, essentially, if it loves you in a way that you can't tell whether it's real or not, it is real.
That's a physics view of love.
Yeah. If you cannot prove that it does not. If there's no test that you can apply that would allow you to tell the difference, then there is no difference.
Right. And it's similar to seeing our world as simulation. There may not be a test to tell the difference between what the real world and the simulation, and therefore, from a physics perspective, it might as well be the same thing.
Yes. And there may be ways to test whether it's a simulation. There might be. I'm not saying there aren't. But you could certainly imagine that a simulation could correct that. Once an entity in the simulation found a way to detect the simulation, it could either restart pause the simulation, start a new simulation, or do one of many other things that then corrects for that error.
So when maybe you or somebody else creates an AGI system and you get to ask her one question, what would that question be?
What's outside the simulation?
All right, Jim, what's outside the simulation? You got that one figured out?
Yeah, in my theory, what's outside the simulation is that place that you go to when you go out of body, when you die, when you have near-death experiences. It's the that other realm. So it's not non-material. It's interactive, and it's where your consciousness exists, but you're not incarnated in a physical body playing this quote game that we're playing on each incarnation of our life. Much more than that, all we have is the evidence that people who have experienced those realms can tell us, which includes mystics and astral travelers and people who have had NDEs inadvertently and things like that. But it's all fairly consistent. So that alone is evidence to consider it seriously. And one of the interesting things about science, we think of science as something that has to be experimental, that you have to have some experiment that provides some data that's completely consistent, or it's not science. And that's not really true. Medical case studies, for example, is bona fide science, but each one of them is unique. It's the aggregation of all those case studies that make a theory about what might cause a certain disease or something like that, or how best to treat it. So medicine, clinical evaluation, and judgment uses a tool called abductive logic. It's the best fit to the circumstances that we're experiencing. Anthropology is another one that uses abductive logic. We're, getting from, art to agency. Evolutionary biology, artificial intelligence, the Big Bang Theory is even abductive logic. It's the data that we got was redshifts and expansion of the universe and cosmic rays and all these kinds of things. And by crunching all that data, we came up with a theory that is using abductive logic as the best fit theory to that. So when we talk about some of these anecdotal cases of people who have had NDEs, thousands and thousands of them, it's a mistake to say that that's not science. This is real science. It's just it doesn't fit some people's view of what constitutes normal science, but it really is science.
So I'm glad you said that, because Dean Radin kind of was the first person that made me realize, one of the biggest first people that made me realize there are very credible scientists looking into these things. And when he wrote that book, Magic is Real, I started to really get interested in this. So that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. When it comes to consciousness, it seems to me like, and I used to talk about this as if I know for sure, but it seems to me like the subconscious, symbols, things that have to do with the subconscious, have a way of allowing us to hack the system. And I don't mean, maybe I'm just calling it hack because we don't understand it, but when it comes to things like manifestation, so they came out with The Secret, which kind of tapped into the subconscious, right? But when you look into things like magic, right, or sigil magic, or reprogramming the mind, then these weird things happen, right? Synchronicity, deja vu, all this other stuff. I think that we are definitely learning how to hack into the program, and I think that the subconscious, or that level below whatever this awareness you and I are having now, is the subset, is the program that's running this thing that creates.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's a great topic. So when we go around about our daily world, our minds are filled with monkey chatter, what about that show we saw last night? What are you having for dinner tonight? I can't believe I said that to that person yesterday. What meeting do I have tomorrow? All of that kind of stuff that's in the foreground. Think of that as at the top of your level of consciousness, if you want to use a direction to it. It's the cloud of crap that's going on. And it's actually our conscious mind is not all that fast, and it doesn't retain all that many things. There are some studies that show you can keep track of 7 things at one time, and that the amount of data that you're processing at the conscious level is bits per second, essentially. But below that is what we've loosely termed subconscious, and that's not anything mystical. What it is, it's our collective experiences. It's everything that we've experienced our entire lives, and all the thoughts we've had about it and so forth. That's all there. And so when we clear out the monkey chatter, and this is why meditation is such a good tool, when we clear out the monkey chatter, now we're able to tap into that lower level of stuff, which is very, very powerful. The subconscious processes information at, some people say gigabits per second, millions, billions of times faster than your conscious mind. And it contains much more than your conscious mind is able to contain. So it's a really powerful engine that's there. If you can get below that even, now I think you're getting into an awareness of where the consciousness really is. That's difficult to do through meditation, through hallucinogens, perhaps ritualistic drumming or dancing or whatever. You can sometimes do that. You can get away from the conscious level, get through the subconscious, and tap into where your consciousness truly exists, which is out there somewhere. It's not in this world. It's not coming out of your brain. And that's what OBEs are. That's what NDEs are. That's what astral travel is and stuff like that. So, yeah, the subconscious is a powerful tool to make use of in your day-to-day world, because it constitutes all of your experiences, is where your ideas come from, and your intuition and your problem solving a lot of times comes from that layer. But then getting through that layer to an even deeper layer of awareness is where the mystical stuff and the spiritual stuff comes in.
Sure. Right. And I don't know how accurate it is, but they say that the subconscious runs 90% of everything, and our upper level consciousness that you were just mentioning about the meetings tomorrow and stuff, that's just the top layer. It's like 10% or whatever. Well, if that's true, then that's kind of scary to think that 10% of us we're only using that level. Well, not scary. It just, I don't know. We're only using that level to figure out reality. Maybe we should dig a little further. And that's why I always say consciousness exploration could be the answers to a lot of these things, that the greatest mysteries. Just learn to become better explorers of consciousness.
I totally agree. Don't even think I can add much more to that. I think you said it really well.
Yeah. See, I'm starting to like being a Southern hillbilly actually now, but seriously though, I do have fears about certain things, but I start to realize that some of them do keep me from doing what I want to do. If you take like what Thomas was talking to me about, and I'm curious about what your opinions are on this. If I was to have an out-of-body experience and I ran into something that just completely terrifies me, that represents some type of barrier in the software system that maybe is programmed to keep me from going forward, or it could be a portal so that I could look into it further. I know that sounds wild, but are you getting what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think another part of it could be the evolution of your consciousness for some reason is just not ready for that, or you don't want it to be ready for that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything negative there. It's just like, we may have some blinders towards some things that we're just not comfortable with yet. Once we get more comfortable with that, like earlier, what we talked about earlier on, those things can open up. You mentioned The Secret before. These ideas, the placebo effect, power of positive thinking, visualization, and something like that, those have a place in the theory that I'm talking about. They're a higher level of abstraction, if you will. It's a kind of a higher level concept. The placebo effect, the idea of mind over matter, or that your mind can make you feel better, or change an infection that you have, or something like that. That's a high level concept. But what's underlying that concept is the idea that that our reality is kind of soft. And again, your intent and your consciousness can influence it. As the quantum physics experiments show, your consciousness is part of reality. So if reality is nothing more than information flow, and your consciousness or intent can modify that information flow, then it's pretty obvious that that something like the placebo effect exists. Power of positive thinking, The Secret, all that kind of stuff exists. So it's just one way of kind of looking at it. I think of these layers of reality with the digital consciousness theory or programmed reality at the bottom layer. It's something that we can't probably get to in terms of its actual physical construct. But above that is the rule engines, the finite state machines, the cellular automata that some people talk about. Above that is an idea of the holographic theory. Holographic theory is saying that we're deeply connected. Something could be separate from somebody else, and the apparent paths of communication have to follow laws of physics and relativity and stuff like that. But underneath the level of reality, we're connected in some way. Well, how are we connected? We're connected through the cellular automata and the digital consciousness theory. So that's the underpinning of the holographic theory. The holographic theory provides a perfect explanation for almost all the paranormal experiences and some of the anomalies like placebo effect and things like that. So, I try to model this in the book too to give people some ways of thinking about this so that they're not thinking, oh, well, a spiritual experience is completely different than what Jim's talking about, or string theory is completely different, or grand unified theory is different, or The Secret is different, or paranormal is different. No, they all have their place in the hierarchy of explanations of experience. It's just that the deepest level is the digital consciousness theory that I'm talking about.
Earlier, speaking of the digital consciousness theory, you brought up about how a rock, if you threw it in water, it would ripple and cause certain things to happen, which was kind of like a simplified version of maybe the cause and effect of the nature of reality, right? So the nature of reality is that we live in this, we could say, lake of infinite possibilities, that when certain rocks and pebbles get thrown in, it creates certain things physically too, as well. Right. But where I get tossed up on that is choice. And I kind of lost my train of thought, but we have a choice all the time. And it's just hard for me because if you look out in the universe, right, even in, nature, it seems to me like everything is just doing its job, except we have a choice. So this idea of infinite consciousness is everything, and everything is consciousness. I'm not so sure. Sometimes I wonder if some things are just energy, not everything is sentient, and other things are just modes of consciousness living inside of it.
Yeah, I kind of view it as a spectrum. Like at one end of the spectrum is the very pure, aware, sentient consciousness. At the other end of the spectrum is the rock, although some people would argue that a rock has consciousness, but it's the pure energy or matter or pure information that has no consciousness. Tom Campbell says consciousness is organized bits. So if that's the case, then a rock does have consciousness, but it's really dim. It's way at the other end of the spectrum. And in between, there are plants and other things that have intermediate levels of consciousness. So I don't look at it as a binary, like this has consciousness and this doesn't. I look at it as a kind of a continuum, and everything has a little bit of consciousness by virtue of the nature of
what it is, right?
Constitutes that. It's all made of complex information, and complex information has some level of consciousness.
Well, that's kind of like what Rudolf Steiner talks about, I think, a little bit. So, or the idea of, what is it? Not animation. It's a different word, but do you think that we are developing in a state of development, when it comes to consciousness? And I'm just going to use an example, and it could be totally different. But I've read books like this where we start out as in the element kingdom, and then the animal, and then we graduate to human, then we're going to graduate to something else. Like that we're in a state of becoming something bigger than what we perceive now.
Yeah, I think that's been the case for forever. The way I look at this is that all that there is a big sea of consciousness. You can call it consciousness, you can call it organized information. It's all the same thing. That's all that's out there. It's subdivided itself into individuated pieces of consciousness, which is yours, mine, the gnat on the table, the dog, the tree, or whatever. Now, those you could think of visually, if it's convenient, as smaller clouds of consciousness out there, all together. And all this stuff is all together. So that's when the mystics say we're part of a whole, we're part of God, we're all connected. It's true, because we're all part of the same thing. But we're also individuated in the sense that we can have a somewhat bounded experience, and so can others. And that allows us to interact and learn and evolve our consciousness. The way we do that, the way that the system has evolved to do that is to provide this, quote, physical reality construct that we think we live in, the thing that we incarnate into all the time. That's a different piece of all that there is. So you got our consciousness pieces out there, and then you got this construct out there that the consciousness connect to. That model is a really powerful model, and I use it in the new book to explain everything. How does telepathy work? How does nurture versus nature work? How do UFO experiences work? How does quantum entanglement work? All of those kind of things make sense when you think of the model in this way.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, and I do look at this. I think it's in our nature sometimes to look at things in a binary form until we realize that it's not always binary, right? There's always two sides of the same coin. But
go ahead, sure.
Well, I did run it. So one thing about that though is I'm kind of been thinking about is Neil deGrasse Tyson talked to an audience about this, and he said, well, people always want to talk about mystic explanations and stuff because the earth and creation is so mathematically perfected, and there's just too many circumstances that cannot be a coincidence. He said, however, if I put you in a room with a lot of people and we all flipped a coin and there was 3,000 people and you'd say 3,000 coincidences can't create something special. And he said, so if I put you in a room with 3,000 people and everybody with heads gets to stay and everybody with tails gets to leave. And this is just a small example, right? You keep doing that and probability will always take it down to one thing that's left. And he said, that's how he explains the creation. That takes away a lot of mysticism though, right? It's kind of like, oh man, well, if that's the case, then everything's just kind of not as mystical and magical as I thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah, remember in the beginning I said that he's talking exactly about what we talked about in the beginning of this interview, where the Anthropic Principle and the many worlds theory. Every possibility of combination of coin that could come up is, effectively equivalent in his analogy, is equivalent to a different universe. And most of those universes don't exist. So kind of like what he's saying is, all of the people in the room, that one time that all the coins, flipped heads is astronomically improbable, just the way it seems astronomically improbable that our universe is perfectly designed. And yet it can happen. But for it to happen, all the other things have to happen too. So there have to be, and I know this isn't a word, zillions, because there isn't a word that describes the sheer number of universes that have to exist for his theory to make any sense. It's not quadrillions. It's not 1 followed by 100 zeros. It's not that factorial. It's astronomical, because every time there's a quantum mechanical decision made, does a particle spin this way or does it spin that way? In his theory, two universes fork off, and there is one where the particle spun one way and spun the other way. Now think about how many particles there are and how many, decisions have to be made, and you pretty soon your brain just starts hurting. So his whole argument is ridiculous, in my opinion. It's basically saying all this other crap exists, but we just happen to be in the one that where everything lines up perfectly for us. Why would that be? It makes no sense. Again, Occam's razor says that's the most ludicrous explanation for why things are perfectly designed. It's much easier to say we had a self-evolving universe. You can take God out of it. If Neil deGrasse Tyson's afraid of God, just say it was a self-evolving universe and there was no God. Call God the universe itself, whatever it is. That satisfies the mystics, but it could also satisfy him. If he's afraid of the concept of God or a creator, just call it self-evolving. And that explains everything without this crazy, many universes theory that he's referring to.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you for saying that. Look, guys, we only got just a few minutes left with Jim. TheUniverseSolved.com. Go check out the website, grab the books. Tell me what you think. Give me your feedback on all this. Be right back.
This is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on the Fringe FM.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? CannaSense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. CannaSense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and CannaSense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
Ahoy there. Gigi here from Shift Happens. Do you like to boogie down to topics such as ufology, the occult, and the mysteries behind our reality? Well, I invite you to join us every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, that's 10 p.m. Eastern, as we like to punch that curiosity button and tickle that fancy. We tickle that fancy, but yeah, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but there's certainly a lot of tickling going on over here at Shift Happens.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
AncientLifeOil.com. For your CBD needs, just remember, AncientLifeOil.com. What does it do for the body, you ask? I can't say due to the people in the suits that run the industry. Big Pharma's all over CBD because of its well, you know what I mean. Research the benefits of CBD on Google and come back to AncientLifeOil.com and purchase your CBD today. Non-GMO and all organic. You don't want to be using a petroleum product. You want to be using the cleanest CBD product on the market. AncientLifeOil.com. We even have CBD for your pet. Help your pet's discomfort. Help your discomfort. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Newly reduced prices to pass off the savings to the most important person. You. AncientLifeOil.com. And one more thing, we have topicals too. So if you have joint pain and some different issues that are going on in your body, you might want to use a topical. Think about it. AncientLifeOil.com.
Alex Exum.
This is Alex Exum of the Exum Experience in Live Talk, where we discuss current events, society, and culture. My shows are based in actuality, actual existence, contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. You can listen to me live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. only on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
When I'm done running with the wolves after hunting down a half-ton bison, I look forward to a mind-teetering escapade evening on The Fringe FM.
You're listening to The Fringe FM, and I'm Michael Deacon reminding you can find my show right here on The Fringe FM every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or by going to michaeldeacon.com. The choice is yours.
Tonight we're speaking with Jim Elvidge, theuniversesolved.com, also his book, The Digital Consciousness. This is like one of my favorite things to do, Jim, because I get to really bring out the nerdy stuff about me in these shows like this. And I say nerdy, but I really, like you, I do look forward to, I'm not one of those guys that are scared of technology, transhumanism a little bit, but I am kind of excited about the future of tech and what we're going to discover. Just like you as well. So I appreciate you saying that. Also appreciate the fact that guys like you look into mysticism, you especially, because you've got a lot of quality information in the book that I think it would take us days to talk about. But I do, before I get to the questions in chat, I want to ask you one more thing. There is a thing in your book, a title called The 30 Years to Acceptance, and that's in your Digital Consciousness book, A Transformative Vision. What does that mean, 30 years to acceptance?
Yeah, that's the idea that whenever there's and I don't want to say whenever, but a lot of times when there's a new radical idea about something that breaks old paradigms, it's initially, people react to it, especially in the scientific community, with words like pseudoscience, woo-woo, crap, whatever it is. Take some examples. Georg Ohm, you've probably heard of Ohm's law, sort of the cornerstone of electrical engineering. He came up with that in 1860 or something like that. It was based on, electrochemistry, I believe. And he was considered a charlatan. One of the professors at his university, I think he was like denied a professorship or something. And, he was an outcast then for years. And then 30 years later, he was vindicated, and it was standard part of, of science. The same thing happened when some amateur archaeologists discovered caves in the south of France and said, humans were living in there from an era of, say 30,000 BC or something way before other people thought that humans had, a certain way of thinking and expressing themselves from the patterns on the walls in the caves. And so those people who had those ideas were laughed out of the profession until 30 years later, and we've never changed. One of the most recent examples of this was cold fusion. Cold fusion, Fleischmann and Pons found something, maybe hastily wrote a paper about it, but they were just laughed out of the scientific community, called charlatans and pseudoscience and crackpots and all that usual stuff that they get. And that was at 1989. Again, 30 years later, CERN, one of the institutions that made fun of them, came out and said that the experiments they did and the reactions that they discovered merit further study. And since they did those experiments, there have been various labs and Toyota and U.S. Department of Energy and MIT that have repeated the experiments. They just changed the name. They don't use the name cold fusion anymore. They use LENR, low energy nuclear reactions. But it's all the same thing. So the 30-year to acceptance model is that it seems like it takes about 30 years, 20 to 30 years for an idea or a theory that really breaks the paradigms of normal accepted scientific ideas to get accepted. And I think that the thing that we're talking about tonight is one of those ideas. The first people who talked much about it were, myself and Tom Campbell and Brian Whitworth and a few others in the early 2000s. And that was it. Now everybody's talking about Elon Musk. Popular Science has articles about, are we living in a simulation all the time? They trot out the same people, Nick Bostrom and Elon Musk, over and over again, because those are the big names, and everybody just builds on what they read on other articles. But so it's getting, as you alluded to early on, it's getting a lot more attention. It's getting real research. There's real scientific studies now that are being done to try to discern whether the true nature of reality is digital. There are those pioneering scientists like Darrell Bem and who did you mention earlier with the book? Name escapes me at the moment. The guy who did all the studies on telepathy. Anyway,
I totally forgot. To be honest with you.
Sorry, Dean Radin.
Dean Radin,
People like that who have scientific credentials and who have the courage to publish things and put up with the abuse that they take. They're pushing the limits, and other people are starting to jump on that bandwagon. It's going to take about 30 years, but my prediction is in 10 years' time, these ideas are going to be much more mainstream, and people will say, yeah, we always thought so. So that's the 30 year to acceptance idea.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that too. You were on, we were talking about during the break how you were on with Art Bell when he was on Midnight in the Desert. And I asked you this too, like, I need to get to these questions do you guys get impatient with explaining yourselves? I'm very, very, impressed with the patience of some folks in the scientific community and what they're going on these radio shows, having to keep talking about this stuff to society over and over again. And some questions, I'm sure you're just like, but I'm thankful for it. I'm grateful for it. So don't think we don't see that. It's very cool.
I'm not impatient about it at all. I'm fortunate to be in a situation where my day job is something completely different. So if I were a scientist and sticking my neck out saying some of these things, I probably would get frustrated having to explain the logic over and over and over, and taking, the abuse that scientists would take if they were to say things that are kind of heretical, like some of these ideas are. But, in my field, nobody cares because I do other things. You know what I mean? This is sort of an avocation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to express my appreciation too. So yeah, I'm glad. Yeah. Cause I would freak out, man. I'd get impatient with it. That's just me though. All right. So I'm going to try to get to some of the questions that we haven't addressed, because some of them we already have. Prince Lucid is asking, can you ask Jim if you are for or against the singularity? And I mean, maybe for or against that it's going to happen, or against the idea of it, for or against it?
Against it for the most part. First of all, I'm against it in the time frame that it's predicted. I think we're already, and I have a blog post that shows we're already slipping behind that schedule because of some of the things we talked about earlier, just human nature. It's harder to build software than it is to put transistors denser and denser on a chip, and especially software that's intelligent. So, we have to understand the mind. We have to understand what intelligence is before we actually make a lot of progress in that. And that doesn't happen at a Moore's Law's pace. So no, I don't think that time frame is right. Do I think there's a definitive singularity? I think something interesting is going to happen. I think we're going to merge with artificial enhancements like memory enhancements and things like that for sure. But do I think we're going to, and we may become a new species because of that? We may become an android type of species that's not purely biological anymore. I can see that happening, but I don't see the idea of uploading our biological information memory to silicon, because that's not even in our brain. That's somewhere else. The brain is an information processing engine. It's not storing all that we know.
All right. And Amandala is asking also, with science in regards to us affecting reality and outcomes, like the double slit experiment and Schrodinger's idea, Schrodinger's cat, all that, can we be seen as the programmers of this whole thing, in your opinion?
That's one school of thought. That was Nick Bostrom's school of thought, that, if you recognize that we are advancing in terms of our ability to create simulations and our ability to modify memories. So I've seen some things recently where memories were injected into mice or tapeworms or things like that. It's only going to happen at some point with humans. So, imagine a case where you sort of goggle into a virtual reality that's just perfectly indistinguishable from the world. I mean, we can kind of do that now with, Oculus Rift and Sony PlayStation VR and some of those things. I have those here. They're fantastic, but you still feel the headset. Well, what if it were more like, a brain probe, like the kind that was in the Matrix, where you wouldn't feel the headset so much, but you would still have the memory of before you went into that simulation, right? Well, what if you could suspend those memories and inject another set of memories that made you feel like you had always been in the simulation? That technology is possible. It's at its infancy now, but I think it's possible. So we'll probably get to that at some point someday. And that's Nick Bostrom's argument, that if we are going to get to that at some point where we can do these simulations that are indistinguishable from reality, we'll do millions of them. And the chances that we're in one of those is much higher than the chance that, we haven't gotten there yet. You know what I mean? So It's kind of a long-winded, answer to the possibility that, us in the future has created this. I personally don't think that, because of the category of information around NDEs and spiritual experiences and commonalities with Eastern mysticism and stuff like that. That's a whole set of information that doesn't work with that theory. In fact, I do a thing in the book where I create a little Venn diagram around the anomalies. I pick a bunch of anomalies: paranormal experiences, near-death experiences, quantum entanglement, quantum Zeno effect, Mandela effect, all those kind of things. And I say, what are some of the, quote, theories of everything that explain some of those things? And you get stuff like string theory. String theory explains only 2 out of the 14 that I picked: nature of matter and the unification of quantum mechanics and relativity. That's it. The simulation theory that Bostrom talks about and Elon Musk has kind of jumped on explains the Mandela effect, explains observer effect, explains paranormal and so forth, but it doesn't explain near-death experiences. It doesn't explain spiritual experiences or precognition or the quantum physics experiments called the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. Only digital consciousness, only my theory explains those ones too. And so that's why I think I tend to not think that we're influencing ourselves from the future.
Yeah, and in all fairness too, we're just touching the top surface of this stuff. If you look at all of the titles, because you can peek inside the book and look at the titles in the books, the chapter titles, you'll see that he's been very detailed about this. Can't wait to read it. All right, so Ferris has an interesting question here. We already covered that. So Ferris is saying, I have been investigating a lot of Hermetic teachings, and it appears that he had taken a lot of those things as well. That all seems to account for his book, but maybe he is using some different languages, like modern language. Please ask him how his ideas differ from the Hermetic teachings. Hermetic is like a metaphysical concepts, pretty much. Not a lot of provable stuff there.
I don't know anything about Hermetic teaching. I've heard the term. I've never read any books on it. So, I think we may be referring to a lot of the commonality that I referred to. I mean, for example, people who have had past life regressions have the same experience about what it's like in between lives as people who have near-death experiences and people who have mystical experiences. Those are three completely different kinds of experiences that have the same commonality, and they could all be lumped into the category of metaphysics. So you could say, yeah, that all sounds the same. I think where I differ here is that the book is fairly balanced on scientific evidence that is purely out of the scientific community: the observer effect, quantum entanglement, quantum xeno, the nature of matter, and things like that, dark matter and so forth, and explaining those things. So, it's kind of half metaphysical explanation, half scientific anomaly explanation, and only a true theory of everything can cover all of that.
Yeah, you and Tom are the only people I know that have actually the theories of everything. Where do you differ a little bit from Thomas Campbell's theory of everything?
The only place I can think of, and I wouldn't say that we differ yet because he's following this from an experimental standpoint. I tend to think that it's not necessarily the consciousness that our consciousness that is causing an experiment to collapse or to be defined, that it's more the efficiency of the system. So let me explain what I mean by that. When you look at the double slit experiment, as soon as you make a measurement of which slit the particles go through, the interference pattern disappears. Well, that act of making a measurement could be interpreted by, it's a consciousness awareness of where those particles went through. And it's that consciousness that causes the system to collapse into a real solution, the definitive, position of the particles and things like that. But I think I think it's probably something a little different. I think it's probably that once the measurement is made, regardless of the fact that there's a conscious entity involved, that measurement forces the position of things. And I think that's the only difference. And he's open to that idea, but I think he wants to try to tease that out with some experiments that determine whether it's consciousness or whether it's just the efficiency of the system that causes the experiment to collapse.
Another thing he said to me that kind of shocked me was that this could be, and I hope I didn't interpret this wrong, but he said we could be the only people in the universe. We tend to think that there has to be life outside this planet, but there doesn't have to be, purely speaking, right? Like if you looked at it, and I was thinking, that's interesting.
Again, thinking of the universe, the what we call the universe typically as what we see when we look out into the cosmos as our construct, as our playground. Yeah, it's very possible that we're the only ones that are really there interacting with it. I would point to some people who have had some of the astral travel experiences and say that they tend to interact with humans and they don't tend to see aliens from another planet, or even if you can remote view other planets, there's not necessarily signs of odd intelligence there. That begs the question: what are these things that are abducting people, and what are these things that people are seeing? I have some ideas on that, but I don't think they're traveling in tin cans from across the galaxy. So I tend to agree with Tom. It's the alien things that people are experiencing are subjective experiences. That's it. It's not necessarily that they're coming from that thing that we see when we look through a telescope.
Man, I am. This is a good question here, and I should have asked this earlier from the text. They appreciate the fact that you're in science and that you are open to philosophy and mysticism too. Was there a profound experience in your life that made you think this? Did you have your own paranormal experience or some type of experience that opened you up to this, or did you always just think this way? And I'm rewriting the text, by the way. But
yeah, I never thought this way. You know, I was trained as an engineer. I took a lot of physics classes in college, even grad level physics, but I stayed with engineering, and it was again, it's a very logical scientific mentality. And that's what I had for a good 20 years after I graduated. It was lights out when you die. It was, although, now that I think about it, I did do a little research back in college about near-death experiences, and it was because a friend of mine had lost somebody in her family, and I wanted to kind of make her feel better. So I did some research about it, and it was captivating to me. It made some sense, but I kind of set that aside in my mind, if you will. And then, slowly over the years, I was always interested in alternative theories of things. Relativity is an alternative theory. It was at the time. So was quantum mechanics. And I would read all these books on different theories. And, I read The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, was kind of inspiring. And as I kept reading more and more, stuff, I was starting to formulate a different view of reality in my head. And that's when it all started coming together. So I'd say it wasn't a specific incident, but it was just a slow growth of curiosity and, maybe being open to some different ideas. Now, I have had what would be termed paranormal experiences. I've had some really weird coincidences. And believe me, I understand statistics and the possibility of, the idea that, okay, you have tons of experiences that aren't weird. You're going to every once in a while have one that is a weird synchronicity. I get that, and I get the math behind it, and I've actually done some of the math behind it. And the experiences I've had were still weird. They're still anomalous. And as I got more open to these things, I did have more experiences. I had a fascinating UFO sighting with 100 other people. We saw 7 glowing balls of light. Now, I'm not going to say that they weren't possibly some,
I get what you're saying. Like, you're not going to jump to alien right away.
Yeah. But it felt unhuman. It felt like there was an intelligence behind it. And it was definitely not planes. It wasn't swamp gas. It wasn't the drones that you typically see. If it was drones, it wasn't Chinese lanterns. It wasn't anything like that. If it was drones, they were drones that I've never seen before. It was, glowing orbs moving horizontally across the sky, in different colors. And until I see some technology that replicates that, I'm sticking with the kind of non-human intelligence behind it.
All right. Well, the rest of these are kind of all we've already covered, and some of them are actually statements, not really questions. So with that being said, we only got a couple of minutes left here. The Universe Solved is the website. Do you have any other links or anything else that, please, by all means, plug away? Tell everybody where we can find your material and your work.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, the books are everywhere. I mean, they're probably not going to be in your brick and mortar bookstores, but they're on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Some bookstores might have them. You can certainly order them from bookstores. I would recommend that people get the most recent one because it's a little bit of a superset of the first one, but it's much more scientific, and it has this graphical model that I think makes a lot more sense in terms of explanatory power, and it covers so many different categories of evidence for the philosophy. That's called Digital Consciousness. The website is I don't keep it up all that well, so it's a little bit, it's looking a little out of date, but there's still a forum on there. There's still some information on there, and I do have a Facebook page. If you search for The Universe Solved Facebook page, you can follow that, and I generally post interesting things there, and excerpts from philosophers and my book and other scientific experiences and so forth. So those are kind of the main social media avenues. Sure. I would say I have a Twitter account, but I don't do too much with it.
Well, listen, I don't either. Twitter's annoying to me, but I have to use it sometimes. look, I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate your work. I really do. And thank you so much for hanging out with us late nighters. All of us appreciate it. It's been an absolute blast talking to you tonight.
Yeah, great line of questioning, Joe. I want to thank you for keeping it fresh and interesting. Great experience. Appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, anytime. You guys go check out the website, theuniversesolved.com. We'll be back with some final thoughts.
Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now, this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of the Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand 3 truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in 1 business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Greetings, galactic community. This is Suzanne Ross, host of Sci-Spy Radio, every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Join me for this brand new show featuring a revolutionary new genre, Sci-Spy, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation. Together, scientific discovery and spiritual revelation reveal the truth about who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Tune in to Sci-Spy Radio every Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific and discover the truth for yourself at the You know, food was different 60 years ago. It was minimally processed, free of pesticides. It was nourishing and healthful for your body. Today, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, and heavy processing have depleted the nutrition of our food supply, which takes a toll on our health and energy. It's harder than ever to get the right nutrition. That's what Life Change Tea is meant to counteract. Our specially blended, powerful herbal formulas can give you more energy without caffeine. It's a mild cleanse, a mild daily detox. A good detox can help revive and bring back the energy of your youth. GetTheTea.com is the website. It'll cleanse you from the inside out with this herbal proprietary formula. Go to GetTheTea.com. There's no fillers, no GMOs. It's organic. Not available in stores. You must go to their website, GetTheTea.com. And their supplements are a great way to maintain your health. Read the testimonials on the website. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
That show definitely got me thinking. That's the kind of stuff I think about too, and I hope that some of you got a clear understanding of why I don't assume. Like, I just don't assume anymore. I think it was Whitley Strieber that kind of opened me up to that, and it was his quote that said, beliefs are walls and questions are doorways. And I know things can get a little deep sometimes when you talk about this stuff, but I've heard Jim's interviews before. I honestly didn't know he was on Art Bell, so I have to go back and listen to that. He was on Midnight in the Desert. He's been on Coast to Coast, and it can glaze people's eyes over when you start talking about a lot of things like quantum entanglement and string theory and all of this other stuff. But you got to know that or at least I know that there are people that are actually trying to discover the answers to this stuff. And I'm so thankful for that. I really am. On a scientific level, it doesn't matter if you do it scientifically. It doesn't matter if you explore consciousness the way you do it. It doesn't matter to me. I don't get polar about it. But I am impressed with the guy's knowledge. If you look at some of the stuff in his books, I mean, we just went over the top surface there. So he's got some real research behind a lot of his theories, and even he claims to have answers to all of the questions. That's pretty impressive. But I know both you and I kind of noticed this too, and he admitted it, that we do see a lot of similarities in things like the occult teachings and things like that where the occult teachings of philosophy, the Kabbalah, it doesn't matter. Magic, you name it. Renaissance, Eastern stuff. This stuff's been around forever. So we have actually tapped into something that science seems to be catching up to. But is that really what's going on? Is that could be just an assumption. You hear people say that a lot. Oh, eventually science will catch up to all this stuff. But if you really look at a lot of scientific breakthroughs, we have a lot to be thankful for. There are podcasts that are dedicated to just totally discrediting science, and not just from a mainstream scientific level, but I'm talking about that don't acknowledge science because they think that all of these madmen in their laboratories are just scrambling to try to figure out the real metaphysical truths that I know about. And sooner or later, they're going to catch up to me. You have to see how that's kind of illogical in a way. It doesn't make sense because he clearly stated, I don't claim to have all of the answers to everything, but my theory answers a lot of the questions that others don't. I really believe we have to have both. We've got to have him, and we've got to have just people that are purely metaphysical that are willing to explore consciousness, journal about it, and have their theories too. But at the top of it, we have to be able to come together on it. We have to be able to see eye to eye. He may call it one thing, a witch or a mystic may call it something else, but recognize that it's very cool, not ironic or funny or even pathetic, some people think, that you're actually calling it the same things, that you're actually seeing the same things. I hope you understand what I'm saying, because this is how we make progress. And I said something earlier in the show that I truly believe. If 90% of us is run by our subconscious, then we're all arguing over the rest of it. Anytime you're in, let's be honest with each other, anytime you're in an argument, anytime you're in conflict, anytime you do these things, and it's natural to do these things, you're out of that system. You're out of the 90%. You're out of the biggest functions of yourself, your mind, and your own power. So what do we really, truly know about the universe? I mean, scientists have been trying to discover dark matter for God knows how long. And they get closer. They what did he say? What did he call it? They tug on the tiger's tail. Just some final thoughts on this. I love having scientists on. More than you guys know, actually. But I get backlash from every guest I've had on. And there's always some type of backlash from somebody, from every guest I've had on. It doesn't matter. People get emotionally, and this is where I think we need to get over this. They get emotionally invested in what they believe. I get that. But why are you listening to a show called Lighting the Void if you're emotionally invested in what you believe? You know, I got an email from somebody that sent me a donation that said, what does it say here? I won't say her name because I don't know if you're cool with that, but it said, thanks for getting my show on Spreaker. That has been on my list of things to do for ages. So I think I understand what you're saying there. You've started your own show on Spreaker or a podcast or something. I don't know how it bothers me, honestly, and I do appreciate your support and the donation to the show, but it truly bothers me that maybe it's just society, or I don't know what it is, that after all of this time, you finally it was me that gave you the courage to do it. I'm grateful for that. I respect you. I respect what you're doing. Some of you are so brilliant. You should do something. You don't need me to give you permission to do those types of things. And I don't think that's what this person is saying. I think maybe they just, after hearing somebody just totally normal, right, like me, normal guy, normal brain, all this other stuff, it does give people the courage to do that. And it's like the call-in lines. Like, my favorite thing to do is talk to people on the phone. However, you can't keep a caller on the phone forever because you got to respect the guest. And, if things get too boring, you got to let them go. It's just part of the show, right? But I see people where they want to call in too, but they feel like they're going to take up too much time or they're going to say something ridiculous. Everybody has something to say. Everybody. Look, I don't claim to be smart. I'm not that super intelligent. I like to read. I like to do a lot of things, but I can have a conversation when something I've learned as I've gotten older. I can have a conversation with people that we consider super brilliant. They're just people. They have all of the same questions. We talked about this before. They have all the same questions that you and I have. What I do respect, though, are people that are willing to do something like this person that just donated. That's great that you've faced your fear, and now that you're going to do it. And now that I know your name, I promise you I will listen to the show, too. And if you need any help with that, I'll get behind anybody that wants to do stuff like that. Anybody. And Patrick just texted and said, man, that interview flew by. It did for me too, brother. It really did. Because exploring consciousness doesn't just mean, to me, it doesn't just mean going out of body or meditating. Exploring consciousness also means expression, whether you're blogging, writing, painting, whatever you're doing. There should be no reason. Like if you've got a passion or a gut feeling that you want to do a show, write a book, color a page, I don't care what it is, express yourself in that way and have an open discussion with anybody that's willing to listen to you, then you should do it. And I think if you keep doing it, you'll be surprised at what'll happen. Yeah, there's disappointments. I mean, I talked into the ether for God knows how long. Slowly but surely, things just started happening. And they will too for you if you are willing to play the long game with it. But I got a bone to pick with certain people out there. There's something that I just will not tolerate. And I'm making the statement here and now. I get that I've changed my mind about things, that I say things that might be offensive to people. I mean, I'm a person. When I talk, it's going to happen. But the people that have supported this show, like from the beginning, and understand when I say support, I don't mean just monetary support. But the people that have supported the show from the beginning, the real supporters, and you know who these people are in your life too. These type of people support you and fan your flame no matter where you go, what you're doing, what you decide to do, what you change your mind about. They're behind you. Not because you have the same ideas or you think the same or you talk the same or you believe the same, but because somewhere along the line your energy just lines up. Your intentions just line up. I'm going to be honest with you folks. It's hard to even say this, but I've been bribed in a way. It's like, I call it backwards bribing, where I'll support your show as long as you talk about what I want you to talk about, as long as you have the guests that I want to have on, as long as you question what I question. It's all the same to me. It's either frontwards or backwards, you know. And the weird thing is those type of people, they'll send you they'll send you more money than most of the other people can't. Isn't that strange? But if you do not validate their thoughts or beliefs, they'll warn you. like a parrot or something, right? They'll warn you. Then they'll I'm not going to support you. I've got all the answers I need here. Stuff like that. Look, that's great. This is like an audio journal for me, man. I'm just trying to figure stuff out as I go along. That's why I called it Lighting the Void. I didn't call it Know It All in the Light. That stuff drives me crazy. So if you're before you think about donating the show, leaving a review or whatever it is you're going to do, ask yourself, if I say something that you don't align with, would you still do that? Because you're not really supporting the idea of the show. The idea of the show is not about answers. It's about asking the right questions. That's why it's called Lighting the Void. That's it. Asking the right questions, and then we can come up with our own answers. And just continue to ask the right questions. And for those of you that have, that's why I posted this on Facebook the other day. For those of you that have supported since the beginning, I can name you off. And the new ones that are here that it seems like I can even have an argument with, and they still support the show. They still share. They still talk about it. They still write, participate. And a lot of those people are saying, man, I'm thinking about do it. But I've also had people that have come on and they support the movement here, either the show or the Fringe FM, with alternate agendas, strings attached that they don't tell you about till later. Oh, by the way, I wanted to do a show, and this was their whole motive. And maybe it's the Aries in me that I don't understand that I wish you would just tell me that up front. Maybe I'm being insensitive or a tad less delicate than you like. But it's, if I'm being 100% transparent with you, I can't tolerate hidden agendas, strings attached stuff. Just tell me what you want up front, for the love of God. And if I can do it, I promise you I will. And I talked about that with Jim tonight. Nature is in a state of becoming, but we have the power of choice. We've got the power to choose. Do I want to listen to this show? I mean, right now we're in I'll tell you another thing too, that's really I don't want to stir up stuff, but even when other radio hosts are coming into the fold, oh, did you hear about this radio host coming back? And yada, 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 yada. Good. I hope they come back. I hope they come back, and I hope they kill it. I hope they stir up chaos. I hope they ask questions. I hope they increase the market. This stuff don't bother me. I have no fears or insecurities about any of this stuff. I totally believe, if you want to know what my beliefs are, I believe that like attracts like. That if I'm into this for the long haul, then I will find my tribe. People are always going to come and go. That's part of it, part of life. But I'll lose tribe members too, but I will find my tribe. And I've found some of you. And I just wanted to say to those that I'm very grateful to you. And you know who you are. Whether you've been here for a while or you just showed up, I know who you are. But I also know those that have strings attached, emotionally, alternate agendas, the old snake in the grass. I know who you are too. And I'm hoping you'll change. But if you don't, you'll see what happens. It happens just like it does with everybody else. Go your own way. This pattern of face and fear keeps coming up, and it's been coming back into the show for months now. And I only bring up people like Aleister Crowley and Thomas Campbell because I've read their books. I've read their material. And I find it fascinating about fear, about what we're afraid of. I am consumed of trying to understand why we're afraid of certain things that in the long run just don't seem like it's worth being afraid of. Some of the stuff we have simple solutions for, and we will just get super afraid and talk about how afraid of it we are before we even try to solve it. Metaphorically in consciousness too, or in real life. I'll tell you something Robert Bruce said to me off the air, and I'm sure he won't mind, but it really rang a bell with me. It was after the show last night. He said, it's not really about what you say and about what you do. You're always going to upset somebody. Someone's always going to try to manipulate you in their own way. But the truth is that there are some people that even your very existence, and you know what I'm talking about, your very existence, your confidence, the way that you do things upsets people. It may be natural to you. It may be something, it's just the way you are. But the fact that you are that way just upsets certain people. That's a mystery to me, but he's right. And you can't get all bent out of shape about it, man. You just do your thing and you'll find out who's supposed to be there with you. Like some of the people that hang out with us in the chat and all the stuff, man, we talk about deep stuff. Carl Jung, Hermetic Principles, interfacing between two worlds. No strings attached. We argue, we try to figure stuff out. But every now and then I'll run into somebody, and I know you do too. You'll run into somebody that your very existence bothers them, and you can feel it. You can tell. Do your thing. Just don't worry about that stuff. Comparing yourself to others is going to make you go bat crazy. I figured this out recently, honestly. I didn't figure this out when I was young. I figured this out when I got into radio, because I met so many people that compared themselves to other folks. You know, oh man, they're dropping YouTube links in there. That's going to make them leave. And they're just so worried that someone else is going to listen, or they're going to listen to somebody else besides them. Like, do you really need that much attention? Or are you really here just to find your tribe? Right. So it's amazing to me. Some of the stuff we worry about is silly. It's just flat out stupid and silly. And if you run across somebody and their very existence bothers you, the worst thing, I'm telling you, the worst thing you can do is go around trying to recruit people to agree with you about their existence. It's not going to help you. I'm not a philosopher about this. This is just my experience. I've learned this stuff myself. Like, I used to worry about, oh man, am I chatting enough? Am I answering everybody's questions? And, you know, this and that. I'm a singular minded guy. When I get in a conversation, I try my best to look at chat. But if you really want my attention, call into the show. Call in. That's how you're going to get above everybody else. I know it's easier to chat. You don't have to worry about how you sound or sounding stupid or taking up time. But to get priority in lighting the void, you're going to have to face those fears and call in. Some of you don't even have the fear. You just call, and I love you. But I get it. But I wasn't trying to demystify magic tonight. I was just trying to figure out why it works. But even the system that I'm familiar with, and we got to get out of here, like the one that I told you guys that I'm familiar with, the guy that wrote the book, in the end, he tells you that once you do this system, in the end, you're just going to discard it anyways. All the tools, all the little Harry Potter stuff, you're going to discard that, because all you were doing was deprogramming yourself, basically, so that you could see the bigger picture, so that you could become more connected with your higher self. And eventually you won't need all these magical tools and all this stuff. But to say that you can jump over that system because you're just all of a sudden more aware is that little 10% talking. If you're actually aware, then you know that you're not over that stuff. That you need all these initiatic systems to go through to break the bonds that you're in. That's a pain in the ass. That takes effort. It really does. But the true masters, eventually they become aware that they have to deprogram themselves, that they have to go the distance, that they have to go through whatever system resonates with them. But the goal is to eventually not have to lean upon it and discard it, to where they're awake, aware, even ascended. And I think at the end of all this, we might end up just laughing, right? We might end up just saying, once we die and all these fears that we have and all this stuff that we worry about, as soon as we die, we might wake up in a machine and pull the plugs out of our system like in the Matrix and go, oh, that's what that was. Humanity. Cool ride. Can't wait to go do it again. We'll be back tomorrow night. This show was produced by the Fringe FM and cannot be rebroadcasted without written permission. Music was by Chronox. Guitar was by Bundy. Big shout out to Pacho, Don, Dennis. Love you guys. See you guys tomorrow night.
On this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.
Another drink. Plenty in the cellar Can't play music till the dawn is breaking. Clang, clang, who cares a dang? What's the difference when